It started so quietly, I didn't even notice it. He had this way of making me feel special, like I was the center of his world, and I clung to that feeling because it was comforting. We had met at a mutual friend's party, and he was all charm, smiling at the right times, listening intently when I spoke, asking just the right questions to make me think he genuinely cared. I was drawn in before I realized it, falling for the image he presented rather than the man he truly was. Over the years, I convinced myself that little lies didn't matter, that unexplained absences had reasonable explanations, that the subtle shifts in his attention were just a product of life getting busy. But the truth has a way of seeping through even the tightest cracks. It started with small things, receipts for dinners I hadn't been to, the scent of perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his clothes, phone calls he took in the other room that would end abruptly when I walked in. Each time, I told myself I was overthinking, that trust meant letting go of suspicion. He was good at reassuring me, at looking me straight in the eyes and weaving just enough truth into his lies to make them believable. And for years, I swallowed it. Then one night, after he had gone to bed, I saw his phone light up on the counter. It was a message that popped up on the lock screen, just a simple "Good night, red heart," but it was enough to make my stomach twist. I picked it up without thinking, and that's when the dam broke. There were dozens of messages, stretching back months, intimate words, shared jokes, plans to meet, all with a woman whose name I had never heard. My hands trembled, but my mind went perfectly still. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't cry, didn't rage. Instead, I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and climbed into bed beside him, listening to his even breathing. I realized, in that quiet darkness, that if I played this right, I could end the game on my terms. From that night forward, I became the perfect partner again. I smiled more, laughed at his jokes, asked about his day. I studied him, learning his patterns, his weaknesses. I didn't just want to leave. I wanted him to feel the collapse in the same way he had made me feel invisible for years. I began documenting everything: screenshots of messages, photos of receipts, recordings of phone calls. I quietly opened my own bank account, moving small amounts of money into it so it wouldn't raise suspicion. I even made friends with the woman he was seeing, though she didn't know who I really was. The plan came together over months, slow and methodical. I waited until his birthday, when I knew all his friends and family would be gathered at the house for the celebration he insisted on every year. As the room buzzed with laughter and the smell of food, I asked everyone to gather in the living room before we cut the cake. He looked confused but followed along, sitting in his chair at the center like a king about to receive his tribute. I connected my laptop to the TV and pulled up a slideshow, not of old memories or shared vacations, but of every single piece of evidence I had collected. The messages, the receipts, the late-night calls, the photos of him with her. Silence fell heavy in the room. His mother gasped. His best friend cursed under his breath. And he just sat there, pale and speechless, looking around as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. I didn't raise my voice. I simply turned to him and said, "You've been playing me for years. Consider this the end of the game." Then I walked out, leaving him in a room full of people who now knew exactly who he was. By the next morning, my bags were in my car, the house key left on the counter, and my phone number changed. I had already closed the joint accounts and moved into a new apartment across town. He called from different numbers for weeks, but I never answered. I didn't need an apology or an explanation. I had taken back my dignity and, more importantly, my control. The thing about being played for years is that it teaches you patience. And when you finally turn the tables, the satisfaction isn't in watching them fall. It's in knowing you'll never be sitting at their game again. If you want, I can make this twice as long with deeper character psychology and more tension, so it's fully immersive for your channel's storytelling style. The days that followed my quiet discovery were the hardest to endure, not because of the betrayal itself, but because I had to wear the mask of the loving, trusting partner. I still cooked him breakfast. I still asked if he needed anything from the store. I still kissed him goodnight. Inside, however, I was replaying every conversation we'd ever had, every moment I'd ignored my instincts, every time I'd swallowed my doubts to preserve the illusion of stability. There was a bitter kind of liberation in knowing the truth while he thought I remained in the dark. I saw the way he smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the way he made excuses to leave the house for errands, the way his voice softened when speaking to her. I could almost admire the performance if it hadn't been at my expense. He was clever, but not clever enough to see that the stage had already been set for his downfall. I began gathering more than just proof. I started keeping a journal of dates, times, and details, every suspicious absence, every odd phone call, every lie disguised as casual conversation. I researched our legal situation, quietly visiting a lawyer during lunch breaks while pretending I was at a work meeting. My lawyer advised me to be patient, to gather as much evidence as possible so that when I left, I would leave with everything I was entitled to, and then some. That became my focus, to exit the stage not as a victim, but as the one who had outplayed the player. My patience was tested almost daily. Sometimes, I'd hear him in the shower humming a tune, and I'd imagine confronting him right then, shouting the truth into the steam. Other times, I'd come across something new, like the necklace I found tucked away in a sock drawer, a gift I knew hadn't been bought for me, and my blood would boil. But I'd breathe through it. I reminded myself that every day I stayed was another day I gathered more leverage. There was one moment that almost broke me. I had come home early from work, and he was on the phone in the kitchen, his back to me. I froze when I heard his voice, low, gentle, dripping with affection, telling her how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait for their weekend trip. My chest tightened so painfully, I thought I might collapse right there. But I didn't move, didn't make a sound. When he turned and saw me standing in the doorway, I smiled, asked about his day, and walked past him as though nothing had happened. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the sound of his breathing beside me feeling like the hiss of a snake. The day of his birthday was the perfect opportunity because he craved attention, and I wanted an audience. That morning, I prepared his favorite breakfast, kissed his cheek, and told him how much I was looking forward to the evening. He beamed, oblivious. Guests began to arrive in the afternoon, friends from his job, cousins he rarely saw, neighbors who came more for the food than the company. I moved through the crowd with a smile, greeting everyone, all while my laptop sat in the corner, ready. When the moment came, I could feel my pulse in my throat. I called everyone into the living room, joking that I had put together something special for the birthday boy. He grinned at me, probably expecting a slideshow of happy memories. I connected the laptop to the TV, clicked on the file, and pressed play. The room changed instantly. The first image appeared, a screenshot of him calling her baby at 2 a.m. Then came a photo of him and her together at a restaurant he once told me he was trying for the first time with a coworker. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the group. The evidence rolled on: messages, receipts, candid photos, even a short audio recording of him telling her he loved her. He sat frozen, his smile fading with each frame. When the last image faded, I turned to him. My voice was calm, almost gentle, but every word cut like glass. For years, you thought you were playing me. Consider this my move. Then I set the remote down, walked to the door, and left. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew that for the rest of the night, he'd be trapped in that room, answering questions from the very people whose opinions he valued most. I had stripped away the facade in the most public way possible. The next weeks were quiet. My new apartment was small but mine, and the silence there was peaceful rather than heavy. He tried to reach me, calls, emails, messages from mutual friends, but I ignored them all. I'd already moved my life into a new lane, one he could never follow. And in that quiet, I realized something important. Revenge wasn't about making him feel what I felt. It was about reclaiming the part of myself I'd allowed him to chip away at for years. He had been playing the game, but I ended it. And the beauty of it was, I didn't just win. I made sure there would never be a rematch. In the beginning, before I knew what kind of man he really was, he made me believe I'd hit the jackpot. He'd text me good morning before I was even awake, send flowers to my office just because, and listen for hours when I talked about my dreams. Looking back, I can see it for what it was: calculated charm, the kind that hooks you early so you won't notice when they start taking more than they give. I remember the first time something didn't feel right. It was about a year into our relationship. He had told me he was working late, but when I called his office, the line rang until it went dead. When I asked him about it later, he laughed it off, claiming his phone battery had died and he'd been swamped. I believed him because I wanted to. That's how it always started. Small doubts smoothed over with easy lies. And once you choose to believe someone, you ignore the patterns that should scare you. Over time, the little cracks widened. He'd go out with friends I'd never met, start keeping his phone face down on the table, and suddenly need privacy when checking emails. I'd find receipts for expensive meals I wasn't part of. Still, I pushed the thoughts away because confronting the truth meant admitting the person I loved might never have been real. The night I found the messages on his phone was the turning point. I remember staring at the screen, scrolling through months of intimate exchanges, my heart thudding so hard it made my vision blur. I saw their pet names for each other, the plans they'd made, the way he spoke to her with the tenderness I hadn't seen in a long time. I didn't cry then. The tears would have been a release, and I didn't want release. I wanted control. From that moment, my love for him switched to something colder. Every smile I gave him was rehearsed. Every affectionate gesture was an act. I made myself indispensable in the ways that mattered on paper, handling the bills, organizing the house, quietly taking over things that had his name on them, so they would eventually have mine. It was a slow, quiet accumulation of power. I started keeping backup copies of everything: bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies. If he thought he could play me, I was going to walk away not just free but ahead. I even made sure I had allies, subtly reaching out to people in his circle who had their own reasons to dislike him. I didn't tell them everything, but I gave them just enough truth to plant seeds of doubt. When the time came, those seeds would bloom into disbelief and disgust. The closer his birthday got, the more I could feel the tension humming under my skin. Some nights I'd lie awake rehearsing what I would say. Other nights, I'd picture his face when he realized the game was over. I kept telling myself to wait for the perfect moment, because revenge, if it's worth doing, should be unforgettable. That day, I wore the dress he once said was his favorite, the one that made him tell me I looked like trouble in the best way. I served drinks, laughed with his friends, and made sure he never suspected a thing. When I called everyone into the living room, I could see the pride on his face. He thought I was about to show him off. The slideshow began, and with each photo, each screenshot, I watched the light in his eyes dim. The crowd grew restless, whispering, shaking their heads. His cousin muttered something I couldn't hear. His best friend stood up and walked out before it even ended. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him and said, "For years, you thought you were the one playing me, but I've been playing you, too." I left him in that room, the weight of his humiliation pressing in from every side. He had built his life on the illusion of being in control, and I had shattered it in front of the people whose approval he craved most. In the weeks that followed, I learned something about myself. The part of me that once needed his validation was gone. I didn't need him to apologize or explain or beg. I didn't need to hear from the woman he'd been seeing either. My life was cleaner without both of them in it. The quiet of my new apartment was like a fresh coat of paint over years of cracks and stains. The thing about someone who plays others is that they never expect to be beaten at their own game. But I had watched, learned, and waited. And when I finally moved, I didn't just flip the board. I took it with me so he could never play again. The weeks after I left him were quieter than I expected. No slammed doors. No shouting matches. No face-to-face confrontations where he could twist the truth or make me second-guess myself. Just silence. A heavy, almost eerie silence. He tried calling, of course, first from his number, then from numbers I didn't recognize. Sometimes I'd answer, not to speak, but to let the call connect long enough for him to hear me breathing. I wanted him to feel that unease, that sense of being watched, the way I had felt for years without realizing it. I hung up before he could speak, leaving him with nothing but his own thoughts. The first time I saw him after the birthday, It was purely by chance. I was at a cafe, sipping my coffee by the window, when I saw him walking across the street. His usual confidence was gone. His shoulders were hunched, his steps slow, his eyes scanning the ground instead of meeting the world head-on. It was strange, almost unsettling, to see him small like that. He didn't notice me, but I watched him go, a part of me wanting to step outside and let him see exactly how well I was doing. I didn't. I let him fade into the crowd. In truth, my plan hadn't been about watching him suffer. It had been about removing myself from his game entirely. But the fallout was more far-reaching than I'd imagined. Friends who had once believed his every word began to distance themselves. The woman he'd been seeing apparently left not long after, once she realized she hadn't been his only secret. His family stopped defending him. The ripple effect of the truth had done more damage than I ever could have directly. I thought I was finished with him, but closure has a way of dragging its feet. One night, a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew his handwriting instantly. I almost tossed it into the trash, but something made me open it. It wasn't an apology. He wasn't capable of that. Instead, it was a strange mix of self-pity and veiled anger. He said he didn't deserve what I did to him, that I'd ruined his life over one mistake. I almost laughed. One mistake? Years of lies, of gaslighting, of making me question my sanity, reduced to a single word. It confirmed what I already knew. He would never understand the depth of what he'd done, because in his mind, he had always been the clever one, the one in control. I didn't respond. Not in words, anyway. I folded the letter neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it away in the box where I'd kept all my evidence. Not because I needed it for anything, but because it felt like the final piece in the collection, proof not just of his betrayal, but of his inability to change. Life without him was a lighter. I could breathe without wondering if I'd catch the scent of someone else's perfume on his clothes. I could sleep without the gnawing suspicion of what he was doing when I wasn't looking. I started traveling more, taking small trips to places I'd always wanted to see. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted from because he'd made me believe they didn't have my best interests at heart. And sometimes, late at night, I would think about the years I lost to him. That used to make me angry at him, and angry at myself. But over time, I realized those years weren't wasted. They were training. Every lie he told sharpened me. Every secret he kept taught me patience. Every insult disguised as a joke taught me resilience. And in the end, all of it made me capable of doing something most people can't, waiting for the perfect moment to turn the tables so completely that the other person never recovers their footing. He used to say I was too soft to handle the world. He'd smile when he said it, as if it was a joke, but the truth was he believed it. Maybe that was his biggest mistake, not the cheating, not the lies, but underestimating me. Because I wasn't soft. I was sharp. And when the time came, I cut him out so cleanly, he didn't even see the blade.